crafters, I've got a really fun project here for us. This is an inspirational project because unfortunately I won't be able to provide you with any of the cut files that I'm going to use. I'm going to use my Cricut Maker to cut out a board game inspired by a word game that we all know and love. And because it's a copyrighted item, I can't provide that for you, but I can show you what I'm going to do and you could get out there and make your own. So let me show you what I have here. I've got my Cricut Maker. I'm going to use my Cricut Maker. You could use a Cricut Explorer, would work fine for this one. I have a framed metal chalkboard, and I really wasn't looking necessarily for a chalkboard. I was looking for metal, but it is metal, and that's the important thing. And right now I've got it landscaped to sit up here so I can put it under the camera, but I'm going to actually turn it and work portrait style, and I needed it to be at least 17 inches wide. It couldn't, no side could be less than that, and it's about 17 3/4, so it just makes it. And the board's going to look real pretty on there. I have, to make that, I'm going to use Cricut stencil material. I'm going to lay that stencil down, and then I'm just simply going to use a gold Sharpie and go through and mark out my board with the stencil. And that gold Sharpie, I was looking at other options, maybe an enamel paint, something, and this worked out so well when I tested it. So it's gold Sharpie, that's what we're going to use. So I did get a couple of packs of them. I want nice, fresh, new ones with lots of paint so I can sort of load it up. But that's what's going to make the board. And it's also going to make a cute little sign. I'm going to take some of the stencils that I make for my letter tiles and take those backdrops and create a little sign that says, "I'd like a word with you," and it's going to hang next to my game, so I'm really excited about that. It's going to be adorable. And then I've got, for the tiles themselves, 1-inch glass tile from Home Depot, and these, I think this whole sheet was maybe $5. It wasn't very expensive at all. There's 11 by 11 across here, so I have 121 tiles. I went and looked up the game that I was interested in recreating, and I needed just over 100 plus tiles. So I've got plenty here. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to take these glass tiles, glue some E6000, or use E6000 glue to glue a magnet to the back, and then I'll put the letter stencil on top. The letters are actually going to be a gold vinyl. But I want to seal that vinyl in. I don't want it going anywhere. So I'm going to actually top everything with diamond glaze, which is, it's a water-based dimensional adhesive that works a lot like resin. And I went back and forth because I could do UV resin on these, or even a regular non-UV resin, or I could use the diamond glaze. And because I'm just looking for a thin coat just to make sure no edges peel up, I decided to go with this. A little goes a long way, and it's just going to go a little faster. So that's what I'm going to use. Now I also have Rust-Oleum, and I'm going to, when I finish my board and my sign, I am going to spray those with Rust-Oleum before we play. I did pick up these cute little chalkboard stands. They're like for labels for things, etc. But I did pick up 4, so I'll have enough for 4 players to use. These are also metal, so they can use their tiles with magnets to sit them on here while they're playing. So I have game piece holders, and then I also picked up some Deco Art chalkboard paint just in case I get a little scratch or something on this board. That way I can touch it up again before I do the Rust-Oleum. So that's just a backup. And I got some Cricut transfer tape here too to help me transfer those stencils over. So I can't wait to get started on this, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to show you each piece of the way what I'm going to do. So the very first thing I'm going to start with is getting my stencil cut for this board. So let's go over to Cricut Design Space and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, here we are in Cricut Design Space, and what I've got already available on my website at craftcuriosity.com is just a blank grid for you. And that will give you a nice starting point. So I've already uploaded mine. What you'll do is go to my website and download it, and then you can upload it for yourself. And I've got a few variations here that I was playing with, so we'll ignore these for a minute. What I have already is I have mine made up. So I have a right half, a left half, and then I have letters. but you won't have that. I do have, when you download the file, you'll get a full board, but I also have it broken into a left half and a right half, and you'll get all three, so you can choose to work with this any way you'd like. Just know this, that the left half and right half are meant to have a 1 square in the center overlap from top to bottom. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to upload the left and the right side. Okay, so I've inserted those images, and let me just set them up real quick here. A couple things need to happen real quick. So I've got one of my sides and it's highlighted. I'm going to shrink this screen just so you can see this a little better. Okay, so I've got a right half here and a left half. First of all, when you create these, if you decide that you're going to put markings on these, you don't need to mark the center twice, and this is the center, and there's the center overlaps. So basically your board, and I did this just for myself to line it up a little easier when I was creating the stencils and having to line it up on my board. I could overlap these perfectly and it lined up beautifully. I was very, very happy with my results when I did my test run. So I have this overlap for a reason. You need to know it's there, because otherwise you'll be going, why do I have 16 by 15? It's not working, and how do I line that up and all that fun stuff. So be very aware of that. So I'm going to get rid of one side here because we're going to just work on one for a minute. But what you do need to be aware is that it doesn't upload to the right size. I don't know why. I set it up to do that, but it's not. So come on up to size, and you see the width and the height. Just change the width to 9.5. Hit enter, and that'll make it 9.5 by 18. Now that is exactly what you want, because that means each of these squares is a 1-inch square, which is as it should be. So there's the grid, half the grid. Now what if you wanted to have your own letters and numbers and things on here? How would you do that? Well, you can actually do that by slicing. So let's just assume you wanted to have a value. So we'll get text out and we'll put a V for value. I'm going to do a capital V. The automatic thing that comes up, the Cricut Sans, is actually a really good font for this because it's very crisp and clean. But the fun part is you can pick anything you want. Just be aware that a 1-inch square can get really detailed, but that sometimes the vinyl doesn't work so well with that. So just be smart about what you choose so that it won't be super hard for you to weed. Okay, now with the V, what I want to do is I want to unlock it, and I want to just bring it over on top of one of my squares. And V just stands for value. You can choose whatever you want to put as your markings, and there's some great examples online if you want to use the same inspiration that I'm using. So I'll put a V, and hopefully you'll know what I mean by that. And then maybe the V, that value is a double or triple or something along those lines. So maybe I also want to have another bit of text that says times 3. So maybe it's the value times 3. So I'm going to bring those letters over as well. Okay, now first of all, I've got my V just about where I want it, but I'm going to highlight it again, and I'm going to come over here. This is just me. If you want all your letters to have the same height, you could. See how it's 0.764? I'm just going to make that a 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch. And now every letter I bring over, I can size that way and feel very confident that I've got consistency. That's just me. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be consistent, but if you want it to be, you can do that. Now this times 3, I'm going to shrink down, and I'm going to just bring it over and fit it next to my V there. And same thing, I really kind of like the size of it. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit, not that far. And I really like the way that's lining up. So what I am going to do here though on the times 3, same thing on height. I'm going to make this 0.25 or 1/4 of an inch and just make that consistent as well. Enter, and there we go. Now by doing that, it kind of brought it up a little bit. So I might want to come back and then just move it back down or move it around. Maybe I liked where it was. You know, you can do whatever you want. So there we go. Now I need, if you look at over here on the right hand side, you'll see the X or the X3 and the V are two different layers, and I need that to change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my game board for a minute. The reason I'm doing this is I want to slice it out of the game board and make one stencil. So I'm going to hide my game board for a minute, and then I'm going to come over and just grab both of those. And you can see they're both grabbed because they're both shadowy over here, highlighted, I suppose, in gray. Then I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to select Weld. Okay, now look over here and you'll see that it's a VX3 on one layer. The only way you can create a slice is if you just have two layers that you're working with. So you absolutely have to reduce it down to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do now is this outer layer, the game board is selected. I'm going to hit Control and hit my V. Okay, so now that they're all selected, again, you can see that they're all highlighted here. I'm going to come down to Slice, click on that. Make sure you put your letter where you want it before you do this, by the way. This is just an example. And I'm going to move that off, and then I'm going to move another little slice off of there. And now you can see that my game board has this cut out of it. My stencil is exactly the way I want it, and I'm going to just delete that excess. Now I might want this somewhere else, so I can maybe come over here and put one here. And here's a little trick. If I wanted a whole bunch of them, like maybe I'm making the letters A and maybe I need 5 A's, I could make a whole bunch of these. So let's just put it there for a minute. Let's hit Duplicate. And I made a whole bunch. And I'm just going to make these, and I'm going to set them up here, put them onto my squares wherever I think I want them. And this is a great way to make all your letter stencils as well. You can use the existing 1-inch squares and make a whole bunch at once. Here's the thing though, look at all these different layers. I can't have that. So provided they're lined up the way I want, like this one is not, and there are new tools here to help you line things up better. I'm just not going to go into all that here. You can work that out in your design space, but kind of set everything up approximately where you want it. And I'm going to hide the board again for a minute. I'm going to select everything. Don't move them around at all. Weld those, and boom, shrinks down to one layer. You can see right here. And now I'm going to make my board visible again. And it doesn't move, so it's all lined up where I want it. And now I can just Control and select, and now I've got everything. You see it highlighted here. And I can slice again. And now I can move this out of my way. I can move the slice out of there. And I just got a whole bunch of letters cut into my board pieces, my board squares that I can use. So you can line that out any way you want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get all of this off of my canvas because I've already made what I need for myself. And I'm just going to upload these so that I can cut them. So I've got a game board. I've got a game board left and a game board right. And I've got a group of letters. And I'm going to insert all of these. This actually, I know, needs to be exactly 10 inches. Okay, so my letters need to be 10 inches exactly. So I've got that set, and then my game boards need to be 9.5 exactly. You will only need to be concerned with the game outline pieces because you'll make your own letters. But make sure you resize before you do any of that slicing and welding and all that fun stuff. Okay, so everything's cut to size, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on Make It, and I'm going to go cut these out so we can get started. Okay, now as you can see, I've got all my vinyl cut. These are my stencil vinyls. These are my letters. Boy, what a difference working with real Cricut products versus something I found at a discount store. Just gonna Just going to say it. Okay, so here is half of my design. I've got it all weeded and ready to go. And now I just need to apply transfer tape on top of this so that I can line it up on my chalkboard and put my stencil down on the chalkboard. So I've already taken a piece of the Cricut transfer tape and cut it to size. And I actually rolled it backwards too, just to sort of get some of the curl out of it. So what I'm going to do is, if you'll see this edge down here, I left a little bit of a long edge, did that on purpose. I'm going to take my transfer tape. And the first thing I'm going to do is just line it up, semi-lined up, and then just fold back a little section. It's okay to crease it, it won't hurt it. And what I'm going to do is make a live edge. So I'm going to peel this back. Always fun to try and catch the peel. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to peel that back for a second. Just a little bit, just up to where that bend is, basically, or just a little past it. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut that off. So I'm creating a live edge. And you can see it can be sort of a nuisance. Everything's curling up on me, you know, so you want to take your time with this. Now, I'm sorry everything is white, but I've got the edge of my stencil here, the edge of my tape here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down on this edge. I'm going to hold my hand, basically let that tape flop over onto my hand. And I'm just going to make sure everything's lined out. And all I need to do is make sure I'm along this one edge. And as long as I'm doing that, then I know it's not going off, you know, at an angle on me. So once I've done that, and line that up, get those two edges, just the one that's close to me, done. Then I'm just going to lift this up and let it flop down. And I'm just going to press that in. And now I've got that connected to my stencil cut. Now that I've got that locked in and I know that it's laying on here correctly, I'm just going to bring it back, peel a little bit of it back so you have a starter, and then just roll that forward. And then grab on, you got your edge now, come back over here with your layer, put your hand down, just flat, and just nice and gently peel that along, and it'll apply all that tape for you. Now I'm working in a fairly small area because of my camera setup, so make sure you are working on an area where you've got plenty of room, your kitchen counter or a table, somewhere where you can have plenty of room to sort of spread out. It's a bigger design. You know, you don't need to do this on the smaller designs, but just keep on pulling that through. And there you have it. You can set that aside. And now you've got your design on your transfer tape. So next we're going to put our two, I have both of them done, so we're going to take these and put them on our chalkboard and then get that stencil onto the chalkboard. So let me put that up under the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now I've got my stencil on here taped, ready to go. I've used some painter tape across the top. And basically what I'm going to do is flip this all the way up. Now I took my time, taped it. I actually peeled off the center and laid it over the top of the other piece to line this up. And that went okay. And then I burnished everything to make sure that the stencil is sticking to the transfer tape. I just used a brayer for that. And the only thing I'm going to have to do is very slowly peel up this paper under here and try not to make my tape come up in the process. Okay, because I have so many squares and it's such a big piece, I think I'm just going to have to go line by line. See how I'm peeling this up? Just making sure that all the blue is down there and not stuck to the backing. A little piece of paper that stayed here. Burnish that down a little bit, peel it up. So if you have to, slow and steady wins the race, right? So take your time, bring it down. Peel up a little more. Okay, we did it. Almost. We actually have to remove the transfer tape, so cross your fingers that that comes up easy. And just do this part very, very slowly. I'm sorry you can't see this corner, but I'm just taking my time as I bring it up to make sure all of this is down onto my board. Be careful not to push and pull and tug or anything, but just get it really down. Okay, we've got our stencil laid down on our board now, and all I need to do is go over it with a Sharpie and fill it all in. I do have, as I mentioned, brand new Sharpies. You want brand new Sharpies. You don't want them running out of ink because you want to lay down a lot of the color. But before I do, if you'll notice, I don't know if you can pick this up on the camera, but on occasion there's an edge that's just a little bit bubbled up. I am going to make sure as I go that I'm pressing all those down and making sure that the Sharpie is only going where I want it to, not underneath my stencil. So make sure you do that. You know, when you remove that transfer tape, it can lift it up a little bit here and there. And so just make sure it's all pressed in. Plus I am working on a chalkboard surface. It's a little uneven, so I'm going to pay close attention to that and hopefully won't have a lot of bleed marks. Now I do have chalkboard paint, so I can always do a little cleanup if I need to. But you really can't get the Sharpie back off of this. So if you do get some on there, you're going to need some way to erase, and this will help me erase. But I don't want to have to use a whole lot of that, so I'm going to just be real careful about it. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the board and then show you what I did. Okay, now I've zoomed in here all the way down to my board because I was getting this little glare, so sorry about that. I'll try and cover it up. But I just wanted you to see that I've got all my Sharpie on my stencil. Covered everything I needed to cover. Now I'm just going to come in with my handy little tweezers. You can do a weeding tool. I like these tweezers. I just love working with these instead. I use them all the time. But I'm just going to come in, grab a corner, just gently, and just peel up my stencil. And I just want you to see how clean and beautiful those letters are coming out. I'm so thrilled. It looks so good. So I'm going to go ahead and peel everything up, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, I've peeled off all of my stencil, and I've got my chalkboard paint here, and now I'm just going to go through and touch up any little areas that had a bleed, a couple little things here. You know, when I have a bumpy surface, it is a little hard to get the stencil to adhere. And then there was a couple just little places where with the chalkboard some of the paint came up. So I'm going to go ahead and fix those areas, and then I'm going to set this aside, and the last thing I'll do with it is the Rust-Oleum clear coat over the whole thing. So I've got my chalkboard paint here by Decor. I've got a little tiny silicone cup and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to almost dry brush it and just dab on and clear up any areas. Now I wanted to mention, because I just got really, I think, lucky finding this beautiful metal chalkboard. It has to be metal to make the magnet stick. And initially my intent was just to use like a sheet metal and frame it. So you may not find a metal chalkboard, and because it was a chalkboard surface, the Sharpie did work really well. But you might be in a completely different setup. You might have all metal, which would probably be smoother, so you wouldn't get the little bubbles, but you might need a different kind of paint that'll adhere to the metal. So you'll have to play with the materials that you're using. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and get started on this and clean up any little bits that need cleaning. Okay, for the next part of my project, I'm going to make a little sign that's going to hang next to my word game board. And it's going to say, "I'd like a word with you," which I don't know, I thought was cute. And I'm going to create this out of the tile-shaped letters. And what I'm doing is I actually had run a second sheet through my Cricut of all of my letters. I just thought I'm just going to grab all of them and I'll figure it out. So I did, but I don't need all of them. So I'm just taking some scraps of the transfer tape and I'm just cutting them up. And I just did the 2 O's here, and I'm just popping it over the top and cutting out the letters that I need. So I'm not going to cut out the whole sheet. I'm just going to use the ones that I have to get. and just use up some of these scraps. Okay, so we generally have the words where I want them, and you can see they're just the shapes and they have the transfer tape on them, so we're going to pull them off and put the words down on the board. So the way that I actually do this is I count every letter including the space. So this is my top line. We're going to start from the center and work our way out. Bring these down below here. So my very first group, it's going to say a word. That's the middle line. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces basically. So I'm going to find the center of my board. I'm just going to eyeball it. And I want these two because it's one space, 1, 2, 3. 3 and 4 are the center. So that's where I want my center. So I'm just going to space those out, and I want these to just kind of be wonky and wobbly. So I'm going to go ahead and just start placing these, and I'm going to go with my very center and work my way out. So just peel up your transfer tape. There we go. And I am just kind of eyeballing, so hopefully I'm in a good spot there. I think that should be okay. I'm not looking for perfection. If you're looking for perfection, get out the measuring tape and go from there. And then I'll go to my next centerpiece. And oh, I'm sorry, before I put this one down, I actually want to completely transfer that because I want that transfer tape out of my way. So I'm just going to press that all down and lift off the transfer tape just slowly and carefully. And now my stencil letter is down. Okay, we'll just keep on going and do that with the rest of them. Okay, once you've got your words down, take a good look at this. Make sure you like the placement because right now you can still change something. Once you add the Sharpie, it's done. It's going to be what is down. So again, I can do Sharpie because I'm working on a chalkboard surface and it seemed to adhere really well. If you're working with like a metal sign and want to do something like this, you might need a different type of paint, and you'll just have to decide based on the materials that you get what you want to do. So you may also notice right here I left a little hint of space between the I and the D, so I can just freehand a little apostrophe up here. So that was on purpose. So we're going to grab our Sharpie and get going here. Okay, so once you've done all your letters and you've done all of your outline, you can go ahead and just start peeling this up. Now you might want to just give it a minute or two to dry. The Sharpie will dry really fast. Again, if you use paint, something else, you'll have to let it dry all the way. And then go ahead and lift up your stencil. And there's one little bit we'll have to finish here, and that's any of the overlap of the little tiles. Okay, so we got our stencil all peeled up, and I've got a couple things to do here. I did get a couple little bleeds, probably because these pens were so new, they're very inky. So I should have maybe just pressed everything down a little better, so that's something I would recommend. So the last thing I want to do though is I'm going to do a little freehanding. Don't get scared. We're going to just go in and finish off any lines. So I want to I have to make a decision, you know, is the I going to come over the L or is the L going to come over the I? Make some of those decisions and then go ahead and just fill in those lines. Okay, now that we've got all of our gold down, I'm just going to come back in with just a little bit of the chalkboard paint again and just do some really light touch-ups on a couple of the areas where it's just a little bit of a bleed. So just do your little touch-ups and then your sign will be ready. And again, just like the game board, I'm going to just do one final clear coat. I won't be able to do this on camera because I'm going to take it outside, but a clear coat of Rust-Oleum over the whole thing just to help weather protect it, and hopefully it will last for me outside. So now that this is done, or as soon as it's done, we can move on to the next step here, which will be our little tiles for the letters. Okay, we're ready to do our tiles. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is weed my letters. So I'm going to do that first. Then I can apply my letters. I've got a little sample here where I've applied a letter to one of the tiles. And then there's no coating on that yet. So I need to coat it because these could just lift off and I don't want them to do that. So I'm going to use that Diamond Glaze by Judikins. And this, you definitely want to just let it dry a good long time. 24 hours is great. And, you know, while it's drying, don't touch that surface once you put it on there. And that just to make sure you don't get fingerprints or make it look less shiny, because it'll look beautiful and glassy when it's done. And then you can have a little bit of a doming with this product. So just like a resin, it dries overnight. You don't have to mix two parts, and it works really well. Or you can actually like brush it over and have a thin coating. I'm going to go for more of a domed coating, so that's how I'm going to approach mine. I'll show you. And then after, either before or after the top coat, you can do your E6000 and glue a magnet to the back. But decide if you want to do it before or after, and if it's after, again, make sure it's well after. Make sure 24 hours goes by, and then put your magnets on the back. And it really doesn't take much. Just dab that right on. And I did a couple of samples, and this stuck really, really well. It's definitely going to adhere for a lifetime. So just line up your tile and your magnet, kind of squish it around so you get a full, you know, cover the whole thing, and then let that dry. And I just like to make sure it's nice and centered. That's just me. And you can just set that aside to dry, or you can set that down and get your topping on here. Okay, bring that out to all your edges and let it dry. And you can see how that's a little cloudy right now, but once it's done, it'll be like glass and beautiful and shiny. So we're just going to let that dry, and I'm going to go ahead and start weeding these so I can do the rest of my letters. Okay, here's our game board all finished. I just need to go find a hammer and a nail to get it set up. And I'll just zoom right in here, and you can see our little sign. That's going to hang next to it. It's going to hang right on this wall. And then here is our game board. And what does it say? It says subscribe at Craft Curiosity. And I only had 2 C's in my set, so that's why there's a K in the word subscribe. Just being silly. But I hope you enjoyed this. Go over to the website. You can get that 15 by 15 grid and set yourself up one of these games. I hope you enjoy it.